Welcome back to Hangin' at the Hangar Bar. I'm Scott, your slightly over-caffeinated, occasionally lost, and absolutely thrilled to be wandering through the dusty hearts of the Magic Kingdom Frontierland host. Yep, we're going to explore the land of goats, ghosts, and grizzled bears today. If you listen to our Walt's Tomorrowland episode, you know what to expect. That deep dive style is back, and I'm bringing along a digital co-host for the journey. Today, he goes by the name Dusty Trails Bot. Well, because of course he does. In this episode, I imagine Dusty Trails was booted from the Hall of Presidents for being just a little, too backwoods. So what kicked this off? Why this idea? Last week, we re-released our conversation with Theron Skees and James Warda, the guys behind the book, How Does Disney Do That? As Candace and I chatted with them, we touched on the re-theme of Disney Springs. Something about that moment hit me. I've walked through those spaces so many times and never really stopped to notice the story. That stuck. And it made me wonder, what else have I been rushing past? What stories are hiding in plain sight between the Mickey Premium ice cream bars and the lightning lanes? Today, we're going to slow down and dig in a little bit. So saddle up, folks. It's time to explore the stories you never stop to read, the props you scroll past in the queue, and the parts of Frontierland that are vanishing forever. Hey, welcome to Hangin' at the Hangar Bar. I'm Scott.
And I'm Candace. We're here to chat all things Disney as child-free Disney adults. Stories, snacks, and a little magic along the way.
Grab a drink and get comfy and come hang out with us. Before we jump into the first segment, I want to take a quick second to talk about how I use AI, just to set the stage a little bit. Now, I'm not someone who's panicking that AI is taking over the world or replacing human creativity. For me, it's more like having a really smart, slightly unpredictable brainstorming buddy. It helps me spot blind spots, find better words, and it's honestly become my go-to instead of Google for a lot of things. It just feels more personal. Somehow, those ones and zeros get stitched together in a way that's easier to understand and usually more fun to explore. That said, it's not perfect, and today's episode is no exception to that. Dusty Trails and I had ourselves a time pulling this one together. I've spent a lot of hours tuning, tweaking, and trying to make sure the story flows and the timing works. But if something feels a little off in spaces, please just give us a little bit of grace. We're both still learning the ropes. Okay, we're going to kick things off with the big guy in Frontierland, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Not going to lie, I'm not the biggest roller coaster person. I like the thrill, but they generally are not the attractions that I go running towards. But this one I love. There's something about the Wild West vibes, the chaotic goat with dynamite, and the fact that someone somewhere claimed that it helps with kidney stones. Iconic. However, just an FYI, PSA, this episode is not sponsored by the FDA or your primary care physician, so don't take medical advice. Now, I'm going to admit something here. I haven't paid enough attention to the story on Big Thunder. I know there is one, but most of my time is spent doing a post-ride check to make sure my back, knees, and ego all survived. Other than it being the wildest ride in the wilderness, I don't know much about the story. So I asked Dusty Trails, what's the actual story of Big Thunder Mountain, and what little details am I missing in that queue? Dusty Trails. Well now, partner, Big Thunder Mountain ain't just a roller coaster. It's sitting atop a ghost town by the name of Tumbleweed. Back in the day, the Big Thunder Mining Company, run by a feller named Barnabas T. Bullion, got greedier than a jackrabbit in a carrot patch. Ignored every blessed warning, blasted too deep in them sacred rocks, and stirred up a curse meaner than a rattlesnake in a tumble dryer. What happened next? Earthquakes, floods, trains that up and run all by themselves. No engineer, no brakes, no chance to grab your hat. Keep your peepers peeled in that queue. You'll spot a Morse code machine tapping out ghostly warnings, canary cages saying maybe don't breathe too deep, TNT plungers tempting fate, seismographs wiggling just as the train screeches past, and Bullion's smug mug hanging on the wall looking suspiciously like old Tony Baxter. Once you hop on the ride, you'll dodge squealing bats, race past a mine shaft that looks one sneeze from collapsing, and splash through a town what's more waterlogged than a possum in a hurricane. Back to Scott. So you're telling me I've basically just been riding past a cursed ghost town for years without really noticing. I think I did kind of know that as Dusty was responding. I remember that it's a ghost story of sorts. But next time I think I'm going to have to bring a notebook. Well, probably not. At least I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to more than just the goat with the dynamite. And let me tell you, that seismograph that spikes when the coaster passes, that's Imagineering gold. Or, to stay in the theme of Frontierland, cursed gold, I guess I would say. Did you also know that after you stumble off the train, you're wobbly-legged and wondering if you've still got any cartilage left, you can still spot story elements that continue the narrative? Once you are in the exit queue, look for missing minor notices posted on bulletin boards, old safety memos that are half torn, and a few weathered signs that hint Bullion is still scheming behind the scenes. It's like the ghost of the town is still whispering to you on your way out. Just really cool. I'll tell you 100% I've never caught any of that in the exit queue. The attraction is ranked among my favorite for a reason, but the deeper story was never really part of what I worried about. It fits the theme of Frontierland so well. It ties into so many other areas of the park, and that sense of belonging, that a ride wasn't just plopped there, but rooted in the land's mythology, that's something we'll be coming back to all episode long. As we head deeper into the episode, let's keep one thing in front of mind: fit. Big Thunder doesn't just thrill, it belongs in the land. It feels like a natural part of Frontierland's DNA. And as we look at what's next, I'm not so sure everything on the horizon will earn that same sense of place. Okay, we're going to move on to another part of Frontierland. We're going to mosey down to the heart of the frontier where bears sing, banjos twang, and the jokes probably haven't changed since the Nixon administration. Yep, we're talking about Country Bear Jamboree. Full transparency, I have not seen the updated version yet. Haven't even watched a YouTube video of it. But I did make a questionable choice during an after-hours event back in February of 2024. I used my rare, child-free, ice cream bar-enabled time to watch animatronic bears yodel. And I regret nothing. Was it the best use of after-hours time? Probably not, but it was my use of time, and I 100% stand by it. I loved the attraction. It was so much fun, and it was just me, Candace, and about 2 or 3 other people singing along, tapping our toes, etc. because it was an after-hours event. I loved the animatronics, and the surface story is just so right there in your face. But does it go deeper? So I turned to my old pal Dusty Trails to get the lay of the land, and I asked, Dusty, what's the story behind these musical bears, and what's new in the Jamboree? Dusty responded, well now, you've wandered into one of the most storied stages in all of Disney's theme park lore, Grizzly Hall, home of the Country Bear Jamboree. This wasn't just another attraction, it was one of the last projects Walt Disney personally touched before he passed. Originally dreamed up for the never-built Mineral King ski resort in California, Walt thought that after a long day on the slopes, folks might want to warm up a little with folksy humor and banjo music. And what better way than a group of animatronic bears putting on a review? When Mineral King fizzled, the bears weren't buried, they were promoted. The show made its way into Magic Kingdom, opening with the park in 1971. And there's a reason it's still standing. Grizzly Hall itself is meant to be an old backwoods concert hall, weathered but proud. Something you'd find along a well-torn trail in the Smoky Mountains. Inside, the bears are cast like traveling performers from an old Appalachian vaudeville circuit. They've seen better days, sure, but they've got charm, style, and an odd amount of confidence for animals with opposable claws. Let's break down a bit the deep lore, partner, back when the curtains rose on the old version of the Jamboree. Henry wasn't just a ringmaster, he was the glue. The bear that wrangled this musical menagerie together and somehow kept him from wandering off or setting the stage on fire. He had the heart of a stage manager, the voice of a carnival barker, and a bow tie that said, y'all behave now, you hear? Big Al was the shadow Big Al was the show's resident heartbreak specialist. His deep, deadpan drawl of blood on the saddle made folks laugh, then wince, then laugh again. He was the soul of the show. A bit tragic, a bit absurd, and absolutely unforgettable. If the stage had splinters and whiskey stains, Al had played on it. Trixie, Teddy Bear, and the Sunbonnet Trio. That'd be Bubbles, Bunny, and Beulah. Brought the frontier feminine flair. Trixie crooned torch songs with a cocktail in paw. Teddy floated down from the ceiling like a dream dipped in rhinestones. And the Sunbonnets, they served up sweet tea, charm, and 3-part harmonies. Gospel, giggles, and just a dash of mischief. And then there were the oddballs. Liverlips McGraw, Wendell, Ernest, Shaker, and the like. Liverlips thought he was a rock star. Elvis with fur and less self-awareness. Wendell fumbled his way through duets like a sidekick searching for a solo. Ernest plunked on his jug like it owed him money. And Shaker, he shimmied with joy like he was powered by moonshine and broken banjos. This wasn't satire. It was sincerity through silliness. A musical time capsule. But by 2020, it was feeling, well, dusty in the wrong ways. The humor had aged, the references felt creaky, and even the Bears looked like they could use a tune-up. That's when Imagineering stepped in with a 2024 refresh. Not to rewrite the show entirely, but to retune it. Here's what changed. They swapped out most of the old songs for new renditions of Disney classics, all performed in bluegrass, gospel, and country styles, still played by the Bears, still in character. The new soundtrack includes deep-cut duets, trio harmonies, and solos that reframe familiar songs with twang and warmth. You've never heard the Bear Necessities until it's been sung by a bear with a dobro. Animatronics got a full overhaul. More expressive faces, improved motion, and slightly modernized outfits that better reflect their personas. The theater received updates too. Grizzly Hall's lobby now tells the touring history of the Bears with posters, flyers, and memorabilia, implying the whole lore of performances across the frontier before settling down in Magic Kingdom. But here's the kicker. The tone remains reverent. They didn't laugh at the Bears, they let the Bears evolve. So when you sit down in that red velvet theater today, you're not watching a parody of old Disney. You're seeing a living tradition, one that honors Walt's love for folk storytelling, animal whimsy, and offbeat charm, while finally tuning the banjos right before a modern audience. Back to Scott. Okay, so one other thing that I want to talk about here. I didn't know that Walt had originally come up with this concept himself. So I love the fact that they kind of left it intact. I've always said that Carousel of Progress was the only thing in Disney World that Walt touched, but apparently that I was wrong about that, which is really cool. This gives me another reason to really like this attraction as we go. But Country Bears and the changes got me curious. I was a little worried about them touching it, honestly. But hearing that they kept the Bears, the vibe, and just freshened it up the playlist, I think I'm cautiously optimistic. And hey, if Big Al's still there, whether he's crooning country or covering Toy Story, I think I'm in. Candace and I have opinions on if IP is used properly in the parks, so I'm going to refrain. But remember what I said about fitting in with Frontierland. Does the update with modern music, even in different styles, fit in using air quotes? I guess I'll see. The changes didn't scare me away from those lovable bears, though. Okay, let's paddle over, well, metaphorically, to Tom Sawyer's Island for a little bit. And I'm just going to be upfront about this. I've never really gotten Tom Sawyer Island. I always kind of got the vibe that it was the place parents drag their kids when they needed a break. There's no food, no rides, just caves and rope bridges and a very real possibility of twisting an ankle. It was from a different era, back when guests were expected to be the storytellers, not just the audience. And I'll tell you, I have strong opinions, honestly, that we might need more of that. Get back to the age of us wanting to be a part of the story instead of just being entertained all the time. So a lot of what you're going to hear over the next couple of segments is probably a little contradictory to that, but we'll deal with that as we go. And remember, I haven't actually walked through Tom Sawyer Island myself. I've seen it from afar, maybe thought about exploring it a time or two, but let's be honest, it just never really made the cut. There's always something more thrilling, more iconic, or at least more snack adjacent vying for my attention. Tom and Huck probably deserve better than being skipped for a cheeseburger spring roll. That said, I really do respect what it's supposed to be, a callback to classic Americana and one of the last attractions that really brings that hands-on experience at your own pace energy. I know deep down this isn't just a random playground island, it's rooted in story. But the truth is, it just never grabbed me. And now it's closed. And this time, it's not just for a refurb. It's closed for good. Permanently shuttered, y'all. No refurb walls, no seasonal closure, just gone. And we'll talk about what's taking its place a little bit later in the episode. But let's just say, again, it's a swing in a very different direction. Tom Sawyer Island opened up in 1973, nearly 2 years after the Magic Kingdom. But why? Well, the island had unique construction challenges. All those caves, bridges, Fort Longhorn, etc., it just took them a while to get it done. So before we talk about what might be replacing it, I'd figure I'd finally give it the attention I never really did. So I asked Dusty Trails, what's the backstory on this landlocked piece of literary tribute? Dusty Trails responded, well now, Tom Sawyer Island was what we in the storytelling trade used to call a living diorama. But not the kind you squint at behind museum glass. No, sir. This was the kind you could walk right into. A world where you might skin your knee while pretending to dodge bandits with Huck and Tom hot on your heels. Now, this land didn't open with the rest of Magic Kingdom back in 71. It came along in 73, but make no mistake, it carried Walt's fingerprints. See, Walt grew up in Missouri, and he had a soft spot for riverboats, wooden forts, and stories that wandered more than they ran. Tom Sawyer's Island was his love letter to that. And the magic of it didn't shout, it whispered. There were no cast members showing you around, no ride vehicles, no soundtrack telling you how to feel, just trees, trails, and tension that you built yourself. Let me walk you through a few of the chapters in that quiet little book. First up, that raft ride across the river, it looked half held together with spit and elbow grease, but that was the point. The second your boots hit dirt, you weren't just in a theme park, you were off the map. Then came Injun Joe's Cave. Now, name aside, which aged about as well as a jug of warm milk, it was something special. You stepped inside and suddenly you were in Twain's pages. Tight tunnels, creepy echoes, and just enough spookiness to make you question your life choices. Over yonder stood Harper's Mill, creaking and clattering like it had ghosts churning the gears. A quiet spot, a little introspective. Some folks say it even tipped its hat to Disney's old 1937 short, The Old Mill. And Fort Langhorne, that was something else. Named for Samuel Langhorne Clemens himself, Mark Twain to the rest of us, with rifles poking out of battlements, secret tunnels, and rickety towers. It wasn't so much historical as it was legendary. The way a kid dreams up a fort in the backyard with just 2 planks and a wild imagination. Now, here's where things get downright poetic. The place was packed with tiny, blink and you'll miss it details. Handwritten signs with misspelled warnings. Buckets of used paintbrushes. That old barrel bridge that wobbled like it had stage fright. And Scott interjection, I've seen concept art of all of the changes to Frontierland. It looks like the barrel bridge might be surviving. Back to Dusty Trails. It felt lived in, like Tom and Huck had just stepped away to catch a frog and might be back any second. And yet, there was no script, no villains, no quests. Just a challenge. What story will you tell today? That's rare, Scott. Rarer than a dry day in August. It was one of the last places in the park where the guests were the protagonists and the land was the backdrop, not the other way around. That's rare, Scott. Rarer than a dry day in August in Florida. It was one of the last places in the park where the guests were the protagonists and the land was the backdrop, not the other way around. But like all good tales, this one had an ending. The crowds thinned, the trails wore out, and folks, well, they started favoring structured fun. Something with lightning lanes and catchy soundtracks, and slowly, the echoes of boyhood mischief faded. Now, the river's drained, the rafts are gone, and Tom Sawyer Island, full of its barefoot wisdom and dusty heart, it's part of history. But for those who wandered it, it was the only place in Walt Disney World that didn't tell you a story. It let you become one. Okay. I think Dusty Trails just explained why it never clicked for me. I love the idea of it, the get lost in the story vibe, but when you're in the thick of a Disney day, that kind of wandering just doesn't make the cut. Still, learning that it had such a rich narrative makes me feel a little guilty for not going, like I ghosted a literary legend. And look, we're going to talk about what's replacing it here in a little bit. And again, spoiler, it's a big swing. But for now, I'm just going to own that I think I missed the boat on this one. Let's talk about the Liberty Belle. It's closing in July, I believe. Like July 7th is the announced closing date. And this one is tough for me because I love a good boat ride. But to be honest, I never really understood why this one was one of the remaining attractions operating back there. Other than the sound effect and the view and knowing Walt liked boats, the riverboat feel, that was all I knew. And again, admittedly, I only first rode the Liberty Belle in December of 2024 because I knew that was going to be my only shot. By that point, it wasn't just rumors. I was well aware that this classic was about to disappear forever. And I wasn't going to miss the boat, literally. So I made a point to take that final voyage. It was peaceful, sure, calming even, but I found myself actively trying to focus. It's not that I need every attraction to hit me over the head with a plot. But when you're surrounded by narrative-heavy lands, this one felt like it was whispering while everyone else was shouting. And honestly, I just couldn't find that focus. It felt like a museum piece. It felt less like an attraction and more like a Civil War reenactor's Instagram story. Something that had history, that meant something, but wasn't really built for today's park goer. I lost focus halfway through. I started scanning the shores, wondering where the real story was supposed to be hiding. I just didn't find it. Not in the way that Disney usually delivers it. So, Dusty Trails, fill me in. Was there ever a real story to this steamboat, or was it always more about the ambiance? Dusty Trails responded, "Now you've done gone and asked about one o' the grand dames of the river, the Liberty Belle. She weren't just a ride, no sir. She was a floatin' page out of history, powered by steam, built on nostalgia and running circles around some of the oldest stories in Walt Disney World. That riverboat set sail when Magic Kingdom opened in 1971, though back then she was known as the Admiral Joe Fowler. Later, she was renamed the Richard F. Irvine and finally rechristened the Liberty Belle after a major refurb in the mid-90s. Each name told a chapter in the park's own tale, honoring Disney legends and keeping the past alive, one paddle churn at a time. Now, here's the story most folks didn't catch. The Liberty Belle wasn't built to be a thrill or a spectacle. She was built to transport you through time, not just across water, but across the mythic landscapes of America's early frontier. That loop around rivers of America wasn't just a scenic detour, it was a curated journey through layered storytelling. You'd pass native encampments, quiet and respectful in tone, meant to evoke the cultures that predated Western expansion. Frontier settlements with homesteaders, log cabins, and even an old moonshine still if you looked real close. A burned-out settler cabin complete with arrow marks hinting at the skirmish with unseen forces. Perhaps nature, perhaps conflict, but never explicitly told. A keel boat wreck nodding to the Davy Crockett era shows and the adventurous river trade of the 1800s. And of course, Fort Langhorne on Tom Sawyer Island, flying the stars and stripes like it just won a revolution. The boat herself, she was a marvel. Fully steam-powered with her engine room visible through cutaways so curious guests could see the gears and pistons doing their dance. The paddle wheel turned not for show, but for real, the same way it would have on the Mississippi over a century ago. On board, you had narration by old riverboat captain Horace Bixby, named after the real-life mentor of young Samuel Clemens. That voice was your guide, pointing out scenes along the riverbank and sharing yarns about exploration, river life, and the taming of the American wilderness. But here's the truth, friend. The story never quite congealed. It was all there, beautiful set pieces, evocative design, even historical roots. But it never spoke the way other attractions did. The narration was gentle. The scenes passed like watercolor sketches. For guests looking for adrenaline or IP fireworks, it just didn't stick. And so over time, the Liberty Belle became more museum piece than mainstay. Folks passed her by. Maintenance costs stayed high, and as Disney eyed Frontierland for expansion, the riverboat's fate was sealed. Now, that old gal's tied up for good as of July, dry docked, disconnected, the rivers run dry, and her whistle's gone quiet. But make no mistake, she mattered. The Liberty Belle told a story not of action, but of reflection. A rare space where guests were invited to slow down, take in the sights, and drift, literally and figuratively, through a simpler time, a time of riverboats and raw frontier dreams. Okay, so back to Scott. Yeah, so I'm glad I got to experience it once, but I don't think I was in the minority when it just didn't hook me. But after hearing Dusty Trails talk about it, I think I wish I would have dug in a little bit deeper. I think it could have hooked me because it has all of the elements of something that I should absolutely love. But it didn't. It was like a slow... Yeah, it just didn't grab me like other classic Disney attractions can and have. There was no real nostalgia for me, no deeper connection to the Frontier theme. It felt more like Disney history on display than something that was still living and breathing. Honestly, for me, it turns out the only thing slower than the Liberty Belle was the line to get off of it. Still, I know, for folks who did grow up loving it or even worked on it, I know this one hurts. But as we've been hinting, change is coming. And in the case of the Liberty Belle, it's already here. And before we move on to kind of next for what's coming for Frontierland, let me talk just a little bit as well about the Frontierland Shootin' Arcade. That is another thing that went by the wayside in this case, it was for I think a DVC lounge in Magic Kingdom. And again, I know you have to have things that make your guests comfortable and you want to reward your DVC members, that kind of thing. But you just completely remove some of that storytelling. And what I'm finding out through this episode is that Frontierland is that place where you can go to be a part of the story, make a story of your own. Frontierland Shootin' Arcade did that. Tom Sawyer's Island seems like it did that. I wish I had noticed. The Liberty Belle was the kind of the same way of giving you that chance to slow down and be a part of the story. And now we're replacing it with things like a lounge for people to go relax in. That's what the riverboat was for. Maybe beef up the riverboat. I don't know. We'll get into more of my thoughts and wax philosophical here in a little bit. But Frontierland to me feels like maybe it's losing a little bit of its frontierness, maybe losing a little bit of that storytelling and trying to become a little too in your face, which is kind of what I was always kind of asking for with it. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I don't want. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. But let's talk a little bit about where things are going within Frontierland. So we've covered what's closing, what's closed. Now it's time to dig into a little bit of what's replacing it all. And I'm going to be honest here. I am really torn on maybe even on the side of why. What are we doing? Because at the center of the rumors about what's coming, and let's be real here, it's more than rumors at this point. What they're adding to Frontierland is something based on planes, fire, and rescue. Yep, that one. The Cars universe spinoff. The direct-to-DVD Energy sequel. The movie where the most memorable character is a slightly sarcastic smoke jumper voiced by Modern Family's Ty Burrell. The man voiced a character that his own kids probably forgot existed. of all the Disney IP they could have chosen from, this is what gets chosen? I mean, what are we doing here? Really, folks? A movie no one remembers is going to be the centerpiece of Frontierland in the most iconic park in Disney World. I don't understand. How does this IP fit the theme? So, Dusty Trails, give us a lay of the land. What's this Piston Peak concept supposed to be, and how in the world does it fit into Frontierland? Dusty Trails responded, well now, I'll admit, I nearly dropped my harmonica when I first heard the whisperin' winds carry news of Piston Peak setting up camp in Magic Kingdom. But once I wiped the soot from my specs and looked a little deeper, I saw what might be going on beneath the surface. See? Planes, Fire, and Rescue may not be sitting high on the totem pole of Disney classics, but the setting, that's a different beast. Piston Peak National Park is Disney's take on the U.S. Forest Service frontier, a world shaped by fire towers, smoke jumpers, and ranger stations, and wide-open wilderness. And that does echo the spirit of frontier storytelling, just not the kind with six-shooters and saloons. Now, let me put it this way. When Walt first built Frontierland, he wasn't just chasing cowboys, he was chasing mythology, the mythology of the American West. First, it was the Wild West, Davy Crockett, Pecos Bill, and settler cabins. Then came the Mississippi River, steamboats, and Mark Twain's musings. Now Disney's eyeing the next chapter, the 20th century wilderness frontier, national parks, aerial firefighting, conservation over conquest. Piston Peak, if done right, could be seen as the evolution of the frontier. Not a replacement, but a continuation, from trails and rifles to lookout towers and twin-prop rescue planes. And get this, the creators of the film actually studied real national parks, especially Yosemite and Yellowstone. When designing Piston Peaks, they baked in details inspired by the Civilian Conservation Corps, New Deal-era architecture, and even borrowed the spirit of park rangers who risked their lives protecting land and life. So yeah, the IP may be a little light in the saddle, but the setting, that's got more weight than folks give it credit for. Disney's new frontier won't be about taming the wild with muskets. It'll be about protecting it with teamwork, technology, and maybe a little turbo thrust, which, let's be honest, sounds like someone put aviator goggles on a goat and called it progress. That's a shift in tone, sure, but thematically, it ain't as far from the old trail as it seems. Okay, back to Scott. I mean, I guess I get wanting to use the space differently and updating it, and I'm all for expanding the footprint of Magic Kingdom in a way that actually adds capacity and storytelling potential. But replacing rich, classic storytelling with a spin-off of a spin-off? That feels like we're swapping Candace's lovingly made version of Walt's Chili for a theme park microwave burrito. They wrap it in IP, and then they give you a souvenir spoon. Honestly, I'm really trying not to be a total purist here. But Frontierland, it's one of the few lands that never needed a movie tie-in to work. It's gritty, it's funny, it's weird in all the right ways. It's got goats, gunfights, saloons, and singing bears nursing broken hearts with showtunes. And now we're talking about helicopters in Magic Kingdom. Honestly, Walt might just be blowing steam out of his ears, and not the fun Liberty Belle kind. But hey, if they build a Piston Peak that truly captures that old school Disney feeling of exploration, risk, and quiet beauty, if it leans into awe instead of just IP synergy, then maybe it'll work. But I won't lie, I'm still salty about this pick. And now for something a little bit more exciting. And if that wasn't enough change coming to this area, there's even more expansion on the horizon. Something darker, something wicked. Yep, Disney has officially announced a Villains Land as part of this Beyond Big Thunder expansion. I'm not going to get into it today, but trust me, we're going to have a whole episode coming soon where we dig into what a dark, twisted corner of Magic Kingdom could look like if the bad guys finally get their day. And this will be a callback to a past episode with the girls, with Lacey and Lariah, where we talked about what a Villains Land could look like and what it should include. I'm wondering how much of that will come to fruition as they build and as they announce more. So we may do a comparison of what we thought versus what's going to actually happen and see how good of Imagineers we really are. Okay, for now, let's take off our goofy hat and get a little philosophical. Why did Walt build Frontierland in the first place? It wasn't just to sell coonskin caps or cash in on cowboy TV shows. It was about how America saw itself, or maybe how it wanted to see itself. Rugged individualism, manifest destiny, exploration. Dreaming big and heading west. It was messy, it was flawed, but it was also deeply human. Honestly, without getting too political, it feels like we need more of that type of storytelling, not less. We don't need more IP. But that kind of storytelling doesn't fit neatly on a plush shelf or in a synergy meeting. It's not easily franchised. That's probably why it feels like the land is shrinking. And look, I know nostalgia can cloud things. I'm not trying to pretend everything in Frontierland was perfect or even relevant anymore. But there's something honest about it, something flawed and human and full of contradictions. When I walk through that land today, I see echoes of Walt's original dream, not the marketing-friendly version, but the one with rust and regret baked into the planks. That's rare. That's worth protecting. And if we're going to keep building forward, maybe we don't need to pave over everything that doesn't sell plush. Maybe we'll leave room for the stories that don't fit in a 90-minute runtime. Because Frontier tells a story no other land in the park does, and it lets you be a part of the story more than any other part of that park. And if we lose that, we lose part of what makes Disney feel like Disney. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here. Hopefully you liked my conversation with Dusty Trails today. These episodes are honestly becoming one of my favorite formats. I get to play with AI, I get to ask questions that might seem dumb on the surface, and I'm actually learning a lot as I do. So come out to our socials, let us know what you thought of this episode, and also let me know what I should do next in this format. Should I explore the origins of World Showcase and how we might be able to plus that show a little bit, or maybe stay in Magic Kingdom and debate an attraction tied to Main Street USA? But for now, as always, remember, friends, there is always a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. And as Candace says, we'll see you real soon.